Minority in Parliament describes government borrowing as disingenuous and unsustainable and an effort that will downgrade the country's credit rating.
With this huge appetite for borrowing from the domestic market, it is grossly absurd. It needs to be pointed out that this 49.5% debt ratio means that the country is on the verge of crossing the 50% threshold. Beyond this threshold, the international credit agencies will downgrade our credit rating.
NPP is also worried the Mahama-led administration, in less than 9 months in power, has emptied the country's coffers. Now, is this anything to go by? We'll seek answers from the NDC and some economic experts. And this is today's big story. My name is Bright Nanamfu. Thanks so much for staying right here on today's big story. Now, in a statement read by the Member of Parliament for Tafo Pankrono, Dr. Antonia Kotose, at a press conference held by the Minority Finance Committee on Thursday, indicated that Ghana's debt is rising alarmingly, according to Dr. Kotose, from a total public debt of 9.5 billion cedis in January 2009. Ghana's public debt now stands at 43.9 billion cedis, and that is 49.5% of gross domestic product at the end of August 2013. That's according to Dr. Osei and the Minority. Now, between December 2012 and August 2013, that is within the last 8 months, government added 8.8 billion cedis to its public debt. This, he said, meant that Ghana borrowing at a rate of 1.1 billion cedis per month. This is not just unsustainable, and it's also unreasonable, according to the Minority. The statement indicated. Let's listen to it.
From a total public debt of 9.5 billion cedis in January 2009, according to the Bank of Ghana, not according to MPP, Ghana's public debt stands at 43.9 billion cedis, which is about 49.5% of GDP at the end of August 2013. Between December 2012 and August 2013 this year, the government has added 8.8 billion cedis to our public debt in 8 months. What that means is that every month from January, the government has borrowed from domestic sources 1.1 billion cedis. Having been in power for 4 years, the NDC government was admitting to presiding over bad economic management. 7 months down the line, things have gotten worse. There's consensus, even within government, that the economic situation is in a complete crisis. But with all the oil revenues which previous governments did not have, with all the many loans that government has contracted, with all the donor grants, with all the Eurobond money, and with all part of the CDB loan that has been disbursed, and with all the tax hikes that have come recently, the Mahama government simply is not making statutory payments.
This follows reports from the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research that describe the current state of the country's economy as fragile. Now, according to the Minority, the failure by government to release funds to the National Health Authority and the District Assembly Common Fund nearly 9 months after coming into office is a clear indication that the Mahama-led administration has failed to put the national economy afloat. It further indicated Ghana is hitting the 50% threshold, which will soon downgrade the country's credit rating with international credit rating agencies.
This is certainly not sustainable, but it's really unreasonable. And out of the recent increase in debt stock, about 63%, that is 5.5 billion this year, comes mostly from domestic sources. With this huge appetite for borrowing from the domestic market, it is grossly absurd and disingenuous for government to blame banks for the high lending rates to businesses and individuals. It needs to be pointed out that this 49.5% debt ratio means that the country is on the verge of crossing the 50% threshold. Beyond this threshold, the international credit agencies will downgrade our credit rating. Let me repeat. If you get below the 50% threshold, above 50%, the international agencies will downgrade our credit rating. And already, you all know that the figure I've given you of 49.3 billion includes only 500 million of the $3 billion loan. The 2.5 is not part of it yet. The B plus rating we currently have, which was obtained during the Kufuor administration, will be lost if we get beyond the 50% threshold. Ladies and gentlemen, in spite of this excessive borrowing from both domestic and international markets, the NDC government can still not meet its statutory obligations. What does this mean? Every year, government collects various taxes and levies, for example, income taxes, VAT, National Health Insurance Levy, petroleum taxes, communication service tax, condom tax, taxes on outboard motors and cutlasses, and so forth and so on. Government is required by law to put some portions of these taxes into specific accounts to pay for specific services to taxpayers, that is you and I. What is happening now has never happened before in these proportions. It is unprecedented, unbelievable that a month to the presentation of next year's budget, government has collected taxes, but it has not paid a pesewa into the District Assembly Common Fund.
Right. Let me hit the phone lines right now and speak to the Deputy Minister of Information and Media Relations, Felix Kwache-Fusu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me back.
Right. Now, first of all, the minority is saying that government borrowing is simply unreasonable.
Well, thank you once again for the opportunity. The analysis done by the minority on the state of the country's debt is entirely misleading, because they create the impression that merely because one government has borrowed more than another government, then we are in some crisis. They also make the point that because our debt to GDP ratio is at 49.5%, then we are heading for crisis. Well, we strongly disagree with that position. First of all, merely because one government borrows more than another government does not mean that we are heading for crisis. It simply means that that government is desirous of implementing programs that would benefit the ordinary mass more than perhaps the previous government. The second point I need to make is that our debt to GDP ratio currently, which stands at 49.5%, is within reasonable limits. The international benchmark, at which point alarm could be raised, is 60%. We are way off that mark.
That's 60%.
And therefore, it cannot be said that we are heading for crisis. Indeed, if you compare Ghana's debt to GDP ratio to the top 7 most industrialized countries in the world, Ghana's GDP ratio is much, much lower. The U.S., for instance, has a debt to GDP ratio of 106%. Japan has 237%. I don't believe that anybody can say that these countries are on the verge of collapse simply because their debts outstrip their GDP. And therefore, we disagree with the analysis being conducted by the minority. If you also look at the sort of investments that we are making with the monies that we have borrowed so far, you see that these are capital projects that have a direct impact on the expansion of the economy. For instance, if you borrow $3 billion from the China Development Bank and invest significant parts of it into the construction of a gas processing plant, which after 7 years would be able to pay for the investment and also produce gas that would ensure cheaper production of electricity, which would then ensure that industry can produce at lesser cost, and that would also ensure that the produce or the products that they produce are much cheaper for the ordinary consumer. I don't think that anybody can blame government for having done something wrong. We are also constructing numerous roads, and if you give me time, I can go through a tall list of them. For instance, the Awoshi-Pokrasi Road is under construction. It's almost completed. Very soon, construction will start on the Kwame Nkrumah interchange. If you go to the western region, there are many roads that are going on. Up north, there's the Fufoso Solar Road, which is a 295-kilometer road There's a Asim-Praso Asante Bekwai Road, which is 60 kilometers. There's a Takwa-Bogoso Ayamfuri Road, which is 93 kilometers. There's Aguna Junction Elubo Road, which is 30 kilometers. There's Ayamfuri New Obuasi Asawinsi Road, which is 53 kilometers. There's the asphaltic overlay of Buipe Tamale Road, which is 103.4 kilometers. 438 kilometers of Cocoa roads have also been constructed. Over 200 bridges are currently under construction. I don't see how anybody can say that a government that borrows money to invest in these projects is mismanaging the economy.
So government is not worried at all about hitting the credit threshold?
No, government has always kept an eye on that threshold, and that is why we have not borrowed close to that figure. We are borrowing within reasonable limits, and the borrowing that we are doing are going into projects that most of which are self-financing and can pay for themselves within a reasonable period of time. Recently, when we went for the 1 billion euro bond, we got it at a much cheaper interest rate of 7.8% compared to the 8.5% that the Kufuor administration got for $750 million. And you find that if you look at the schedule of expenditure that Eurobond will go into, there are as many as 157 road projects that will be undertaken. There are classroom blocks that will be constructed. There are infrastructure projects that will be undertaken for the 46 new districts that have been created. I don't see how anybody can.
So all these monies are coming in, and yet government is owing so much. The NHIS fund, the District Assembly Common Fund. Why is government unable to pay all these?
Well, it is true that there has been some delay in the disbursement of funds to these statutory funds. But I must indicate that only last week, the finance minister met with a minority in parliament, at which meeting a clear roadmap was agreed for the payment of these funds. It is therefore surprising that after having sat in that meeting, the minority would come out and paint a picture as though government has not shown any commitment towards paying these funds. But as you know, governance sometimes requires that you meet certain other urgent commitments. And so from time to time, these delays occur. In fact, if you go back and check our history since 1992, you find that every year there has been some form of delay or the other in the disbursement of these statutory funds. But it does not mean that they will not be paid. But based on the roadmap that the finance ministry has
Felix, it's quite disturbing that the argument is being made that every year there's been some delays. It's quite disturbing. This is something that is illegal, and so the fact that it happened some years back should not happen.
It is not. Government does not set out to commit illegality. It is just that the business of managing the affairs of the nation sometimes requires you to meet certain urgent commitments, which, if not met, could create bigger problems. For instance, in 2008, our wage bill stood at 1.7 billion Ghana cedis. As I speak to you, it has increased by a whopping 516% to 8.9 billion Ghana cedis. That means that government is forced to commit more resources towards paying wages, and that clearly also crowds out other investment that ought to be made in other sectors, like these statutory funds. So it is not as though government is intentionally setting out to break any law, but government engages in expenditure that directly benefits the ordinary worker. And I believe that these are matters that ought to be taken into consideration when engaging in this debate.
And so you suggest the government will certainly pay those monies?
Oh, yes, right. Only last week, the finance minister met Parliament and agreed on a clear roadmap with them that these monies will be paid within the shortest possible time. Right.
Thanks so much for speaking. But let me also quickly pick a soundbite from the Minister of Communications, Amane Boama, who is disagreeing with the NPP's position that government is simply running the economy down. Let's listen.
This is a very subtle attempt to muddy the waters in terms of the implosion that the NPP party is suffering as of now. We all know the contest within their party at the national executive level, flag bearer level, and all that. But we will not allow this to stand. They have raised issues about debt to GDP ratio. As we speak now, the US has their debt to GDP ratio hovering between 65 and 70%. They try to cite examples trying to compare Ghana with Greece. Greece, per OECD report, had their debt to GDP ratio as of 2011 being 131%. And I'm quoting Professor Gregory Mankiw of Harvard University. And so, where do you put a debt to GDP ratio of 49% as against that of Greece? In any case, it's a matter of what you use the loans for. They cited the $3 billion Chinese loan. This is not a loan that is being contracted to be invested in a fixed property like, let's say, a presidential palace. And nobody is saying presidential palaces, when constructed, are bad. But what I'm saying is that if you construct a presidential palace, it is not going to generate revenue to service that particular loan. But this loan is being invested in the gas infrastructure. The gas infrastructure alone lends itself to the petrochemical industry. It lends itself to the fertilizer production industry. It lends itself also to the integrated aluminium industry and all that. And all these will provide jobs, which jobs will provide the spin-offs that will be used to service these loans. We have a situation where after government has taken the loans, has taken all the revenue that we generate at the end of the month, assuming all the statutory funds are paid, government uses what is left, 99% of that, to pay salaries. What that means is that government is left with only just 1% to deal with what? The water that we need, electricity that we need, and all that. How can government provide our needs in terms of roads, potable drinking water, schools, hospitals, polyclinics, and all that with just 1% of the revenue that will be left? We would have to resort to other ways, which include taking some of these loans.
My guest in the studio is Dr. Anthony Akoto, Member of Parliament for Otafo, and he is with the minority in Parliament. Thanks so much for coming. Now, the argument being proffered by the other side is that, well, this debt is going to projects that they prefer to call promising. And so we should not worry about it.
Can you tell me which projects they are talking about?
Well, you are in Parliament, so I should count on you to tell me which projects you have approved these loans for.
The Minister of Communications is just talking about the Chinese loan. Okay. We have argued that we don't have any problems borrowing for capital investment.
Right.
But there's a problem with the Chinese loan, which I want to repeat here. The commitment fee is 1% of the undisbursed balance. Last year, because $0 came in, we paid $30 million without using only even $1. This year, we are going to pay $25 million. So in 2 years, you've borrowed $3 billion ahead of time, and you are paying $55 million on it. It is a bad deal. We need to go and renegotiate. Investing in the gas plant is not a project. Already the gas plant is delayed. We know that if it goes properly, it can yield returns. But 90% of the projects for the Chinese loan are not ready for implementation. So if you're not ready, why go and borrow in advance?
So the project itself is not bad. That's what you're saying.
One of them, the gas project, it's not bad. So we don't argue against that. But those other...
But you think that other projects that Parliament has approved loans for are bad?
No, I'm saying that even within the Chinese loan, they are not ready to implement the project. There was one about industrial park,
right,
where somebody was going to take $200 million from us and bring $10 billion in the country. That's false. So they are not ready to even assess the loan. And we keep paying 1% commitment fee every time it's undisbursed. That is what we are talking about.
Are you worried that you're a member of Parliament and these deals are approved by the very house you belong to?
You know how Parliament works. We raised all these issues. The majority had its way, but Ghana is paying. And we need to revisit this idea about because they are the majority. I mean, look, right now, government wants to go and do a hedging deal against the $3 billion loan. Why? Because it's LIBOR plus. LIBOR is about to go up, so it will be higher interest payments. But we told them that that is not the way to go. We could have gone to the capital market, Eurobond, and borrowed $3 billion without any commitment fee, and the money would have been available. Why do you go and borrow commercial at LIBOR plus 2.95? Anytime, everybody knows that LIBOR is going to go up. Now, to save face, government wants to come with a proposal to go and hedge against the $3 billion loan because the interest rate is going to go up. We told them so. Why did they do it? I still think that it's not too late. They should go to the Chinese government and renegotiate that we are not ready to absorb. So we only come when we are ready. Then there's no commitment fee that we have to pay. That is what we are talking about. Is that bad? Because we are going to spend $55 million for nothing, commitment fee, on $3 billion now it's 2.5 billion that we cannot disburse anytime soon.
I want to take you back to the issue of the project. You said the gas plant is okay as far as its viability and its ability to perhaps help pay back the loan is concerned.
We don't have any
Are there some projects that Parliament has allowed government, some loans that Parliament has allowed government to go for that you think are not very good ones?
I think that generally, my experience, and that's my personal experience, that when government comes with projects, I don't think they've done a good job of looking at the viability of the projects. Ideally, you want initially to look at projects that can be self-financing, ideally. But not all projects, social projects may not be self-financing, but you can have some of those. But I'm talking about some of the projects in the 3 billion.
Specifically, that is what you are talking about.
In this case, that it is a bad loan because of the commitment fee and because of our record of poor implementation. Just like World Bank, we have about close to $1 billion sitting in the bank, collecting commitment fee because the projects are slow in implementation. That is not a good financial decision. So we ought to be careful and look at them very...
You talk about the fact that we're not careful. We're hitting the threshold where our credit rating could be affected.
The international credit agencies, anytime you go above 50% of your GDP, automatically downgrade you. What that means is that when you go out to borrow again, you pay more. In 4 years, look, we were only at 9 billion cedis in January 2009.
Right.
9 billion. We are at 49.3.
Government says this is a project that will pay.
Which projects are we talking about?
They talk about the road from Accra, Kumasi, the Asankragwa road, the Sola, Tunakaba, all those roads. Government says they're going to pay these loans.
They're going to do what?
These roads will pay.
They are not self-financing. How many cars go from here to Swalba?
To open up the economy and allow goods and services to move about.
Yes.
And increases productivity.
They have not even brought that viability thing to Parliament yet. You see, the projects are not ready for implementation. So how can they tell us that? They have not been able to access the money because the project design is incomplete. And we are paying commitment fees. So, I mean, how can government turn around and say they are viable? It's political talk. In the end, it hurts Ghana. But the issue that we raised relates to the fact that all this borrowing is going on, all the Eurobond is coming in, taxes are being collected, and statutory payments are in arrears. It is illegal. Government is violating the law. That is the issue we're making. How come government is collecting the taxes, even if you are not getting enough? The law says that DACF, 7.5% of tax revenue must go to DACF. So even if you collect 7.5% must go there. The minister releasing a letter without any warrant backing it is meaningless. Look, the first quarter DACF was written some time back. On this September 18th, he wrote another letter for release of the second quarter with no warrant backing it. Go and ask any assembly if they've received any DACF for this year.
How worried is Parliament that
in
this situation, an illegality being committed, and yet it cannot act? Its hands are tied by the executive.
It is not true. We are on vacation. So when we come back, the minister is going to have to come back to Parliament and explain himself. Because their behavior is bordering on somebody impeaching them.
But you have always said that the minority will say it, but the majority will have their way.
No,
so when it comes to Parliament,
when it comes to impeachment, all you need is 1/3 of parliamentarians to
and you can gather that.
We are more than 1/3. We are 123. So it's not a problem. We are 275, about 90. All you need is 90. So if all of us start the impeachment process, it will be there. We don't want to go that way. We want the government to correct itself. Because you see, government checks bouncing gives us bad credibility. I can tell you a personal experience. Just this morning, government gave me a check for 6,000 cedis to pay a vocational school. It has bounced. Government of Ghana, 6,000 cedis. In the meantime, payments are being made to some people who are owed money, but it's not statutory. We know that. That is the difference. The law is the law, and every government must obey the law. If it says it must go a quarter in arrears, even if you don't collect enough, pay whatever you collect, the proportion. That's what we are saying. And when you write a check, recently government closed our accounts without telling us. All the checks are bouncing. A nation cannot. If I bounce a check, it's a criminal offense.
That's right.
I mean, so
I'll come back to you quickly. Now, the public has been talking about this very particular issue, the fact that some statutory payments have not been made, government owes so much. Let's listen, we'll come back to the studio.
Well, I don't agree it destroys the economy because Ghana, for instance, is a developing nation. Now that we are developing and developing countries like this, we need to lean on the developed nations to develop our country per se. Yeah. So if a country like Ghana is depending on other countries to get developed, there is nothing wrong about that. I see nothing wrong about it.
You borrow you just free amanone and you bet me akra niema bibi ti say you bet me aton ye niema wa ha ayenko outside enko jiska.
Right now, we are not exporting, but we are importing now. That's the problem, the issue we are facing in this country. You know, everyone and his vision. When this government come, you say this. When this government come, you say this. You see, someone will put on his rule or his rules there. But after the voting, when you change the government, when he's to come, he's going to change everything. That's the big issue.
I mean, we have so many resources in Ghana, so the government can look within, and I think within we can get so many things here in Ghana because the borrowing is too much now, and I think very soon in the near future, maybe our politicians will collapse the country.
More a country borrows from other countries, then the more it is unable to pay for the debts, because the debts are always increasing, and then the confidence that other countries would have in you would also diminish.
It's really affecting our economy in several situations. You know, mainly if you're borrowing, you're going to pay interest. If it's a grant, then you're having less interest. But obviously, most of the grants we receive have a whole lot of charges that we pay, and in most cases, and because of corruption in Ghana and other sub-Saharan Africa, we pay so much on charges just for sake of corruption and then issues related to corruption. So to me, I think we spend so much to borrow than what we actually gain on borrowing.
When the terms are okay, the government can go ahead and borrow, but if the terms are not okay for the country, how do you go? I think we have to find a way of generating money from our own country. Yeah.
Okay, I do agree because excessive borrowing can lead us to balance of payment deficit, and you borrowing a whole lot of money into the country is going to leave us with a whole lot of debt. Yeah, so I think it's affecting the economy. We could generate internal funds instead of depending on outside loans or funds for our activities. Yeah.
And Dr. Anthony Akotose is still in the studio. Doctor, let's look at this issue. How would you react to some argument that, well, these credit agencies are not that something we should be worried about because the ratings are sometimes influenced politically?
No, I mean, the whole issue depends on your capacity to pay. And these are international standards. The market, you can't fool the market. They know the difficulties we have, so they will extract a premium on your borrowing.
Right.
They are not saying you cannot borrow. But recently we went to the bond market. Nigeria got 6%. We got 7.8%. Of 1 billion, 1% of 1 billion, that's not a small amount. So we pay a price. So we should not fool ourselves. And we are not against borrowing per se.
Right.
But for example, the bulk of the borrowing is coming from domestic sources. So right now.
And that's a worry for investors, local
businesses. It is a worry for all of us, and for government itself. This year so far, for the past first 7 months of the year, the payment of interest was 2.6 billion cedis, just interest. And it was 800 million above the target. So if you are spending 2.6 billion on interest, What? I mean, and you complain that you don't have money. But you are borrowing, so you have to pay the interest.
How can government turn things around now the way it is? Can government do it, and how can it be done?
The government does not have a choice. Number one, I think that we need to tighten revenue administration. We know that there are leakages in the system. On the revenue side, they can do more. There's no question about it. Before they come up with new taxes, we ought to exhaust all the avenues to tighten revenue. Everybody talks about what is happening at the ports. Everybody talks about people not paying VAT. You have a whole Ghana Revenue Authority there, and then you go and appoint the tax force of 6 or 7 people to collect revenue. It is not, we are joking. Let's be serious. We have taxed the Revenue Authority to do the job. If they're not doing the job, let us give them what is necessary to do the job. Go and tighten revenue administration before you think about tax increases. Tax increases that came to Parliament will not help anybody. If you find time, go and ask government how much they collected from taxes on Chalewote and mobile phones. It is inefficient. Then 2, go to the expenditure side. My brother, if the Supreme Court says that 40 million euro paid water bill must be collected, why aren't we collecting it? 40 million euro? That's over $60 million. That's over 120 million cedis. Do you know how many schools you can build? The Supreme Court has ruled. What are we waiting for? It's this issue. So look at the Auditor General reports. All state agencies, there's misapplication of funds. Those who are responsible, you make them pay and pay back. Today, the Judgment Debt Commissioner, you saw what he said in the papers.
Right.
AAL. I mean, anybody that is allowing government to suffer ought to be punished. When you do all those things, then you have the moral authority to come to the people and say, look, we've tried all we can.
You need to pay some taxes.
The government is not doing all of that. And look at what has happened.
We're getting ready to wrap up. This government has 3 years to end its term in office. Can it do all this and put the economy back as you claim if the economy is not on track?
For now, they have the responsibility to Ghana.
And can they do it?
They don't have a choice.
Right.
We'll keep reminding them that is why Ghanaians elected them. Look, when I go to the market, they don't ask me if I'm MPP. They don't ask me if I'm NDC.
They sell it at the same price.
Yes. So if I'm going to pay utility tariffs of 79%,
right,
it affects all of us.
Right.
You wait 2 years, you don't adjust it because you are playing politics, and you come and say, oh, we'll start small. It won't work. That is why they are elected as a government, and we will make sure they deliver. Because, look, it does not help any government to come and inherit a sick economy. You can't do anything. We went hipping in 2000 for that reason. We are there. I don't like it when a government check bounce. This is a disgrace for me as a Ghanaian. Right. So I insist that government do the right thing.
Right.
And that's what we're
Thank you so much, Dr. Anthony Akutose, for talking to me. There is a member of Parliament for Old Tafo and the minority, of course. They're raising issues about government borrowing. We'll have more on the other segment of the show when Marianne comes your way. But don't also forget that Israel I will tell you more on this very particular issue at 8 o'clock when it comes your way with News at 8. I'm not gone yet. I'm welcoming Marianne for the next segment, the Year Interactive. Stay right there. I'll be back in a moment.